Boa noite a todos, pessoal. Sejam bem-vindos a mais uma sessão comentada do 16º Fantaspoa. Estaremos falando hoje com o diretor Michael Bartlett e o produtor René Berndt, lá de Portland, nos Estados Unidos, que estarão falando sobre o filme A Noiva de Berlim. Agradecemos o apoio da Prana Filmes para esta sessão comentada. E let's go to English. Hello, Michael. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. I was nodding my head the whole time like I understood everything you were saying, you know.
Thank you so much. That's very kind of you. So, I'm wearing my Fantaspoa t-shirt.
Oh, maybe I have one too. I can do it in a crazy way there. Make everybody very dizzy.
And that's so nice that 7 years later, it's still looking very sharp.
It is. I keep saving it and thinking, oh, I don't want to get it, you know, dirty or anything. So now I have a good opportunity.
So, let's talk a little about Berlin Bright.
Yes.
It's quite amazing for us because it's one of the most liked films. I love the film. I think it's quite a unique piece, but we are surprised that the audience in Brazil is liking it so much. I just sent you the link of a journalist, and this journalist he watched already 27 films, and Berlin Bright is in his top 10.
Oh my gosh, that is so kind. Yes,
he
that is very kind.
And he wrote that for him it's amazing because he sees the film as a love triangle between two men and a mannequin.
Yes, yes. How crazy, but yes. Well, you know, this movie, the making of this movie, I know a lot of filmmakers always think this because we go through so much to make our movies. But the making of this movie is maybe at least as interesting as the movie itself. You know, I started this movie in 1986 in Berlin on 16mm film. And at the time, I had no idea what I was doing. I hadn't been to a film school or anywhere. It was the first thing we ever shot. And we were very astonished that a lot of the footage turned out really fine. And it served to get me into the American Film Institute. I needed some film to show, you know, to get into the school. And there was kind of a, I guess you could say a kind of finished version with the footage we had. But I never felt it was finished. And so a few years ago, actually, when I was in Berlin for the premiere of House of Last Things, I thought, well, this would be a great opportunity to pick up that film footage because it was on, you know, big rolls, and see if we can finish it and do the film the way I always saw it being completed. You know, the thing is, the story itself is of course, I know you love it and I do too after all this time, but it's very unique. And I always felt that the idea, the concept of the film at the time was much better than my skills at the time. So, so when we got the footage, it was a very strange experience because I was looking at it like a stranger, because it was so long ago that we started this as a project, you know? And initially we thought, let's clean it up because it was in terrible condition. There was so many dirts and spots and cuts and risse, I don't even know how you say in English, but you know, it looked pretty awful, technically, you know. So we started by cleaning it up, and in the process of cleaning it up, I kind of got the idea how we could make this film better for today and incorporate the skills, you know, with experience now, with all the years that I have. But you know, that presented a lot of problems too, because the movie was started really by an amateur filmmaker, and you can't all of a sudden turn it into a very big, sophisticated film with the expectations of 2020. You know, you have to be true to the material. And I thought we did a very good, gentle way of bringing it into fashion for today, you know, because there's a lot of themes that are kind of touched upon in the film. The whole idea of the sexuality, and I guess you could so far as to include the transgender world and all of that, you know. So we actually did the craziest thing. We started shooting new footage for a movie that was started 30 years ago, before film school. And to do that, we had to come up with a lot of tricks, and, you know, because we shot all of it, most all of it, except for 3 shots that we shot in Berlin, when I was in Berlin in 2013. I just, on a idea, thought, you know, I should maybe shoot this and that. I might need this, you know. So in Berlin, we shot a few shots, but importantly, we shot about 140 new shots for the movie. And we cut a lot of things out of the original footage that I think was unnecessary. And of course, in shifting all of the footage around and shooting new material, it meant that the entire soundtrack for the original footage was useless. So we had to go back in then and create an entire sound design. Every footstep, every cough, every cat meow, everything you hear was created new here in the studio by my very good friend and talented composer, Andrew Poole Todd. And after that, of course, then we started work on the soundtrack, and Andrew plays a lot of violin on there. I actually play a few notes myself. And we got the idea that we wanted to go back and to keep the film in kind of respect to the time it was made. We came up with a soundtrack idea that would take us into the era of the Twilight Zone and the music of that era. Not a totally contemporary sound, but a sound that would seem almost, how would you say, retrospect of that time, that era, you know. But we had a lot of fun with it. You hear theremins and you hear vibraphone and everything, and we created all that in Portland. So that's a little bit of the history of the film. There is another part of that history that when before I went to Berlin, I started to negotiate with the German Film Archive, because I was very lucky. When I left Germany, the footage, I left it in I thought in a very secure film archive that takes care of film footage. And when I went to communicate that I was coming to Germany to pick it up, they said, oh, well, they went bankrupt and nobody knows where the footage is anymore. So I was very lucky that the German Film Archive took in this footage and kept it. And when I went to Berlin, I was able then to get the footage. And the footage, the bunkers where they kept the footage in Berlin, that I wish I'd had a film camera with me, because it's like on one of the far extremities outside of Berlin, on the little train, the tram train you take, and you get out of the tram and it's like you're in the middle of nowhere. You have to think Hitchcock North by Northwest, the cornfields. He gets out in the middle of nowhere. And yes, it was very much like this. And we saw a tiny, I was with a girlfriend who went with me there, and we saw a tiny little building over off to the side. And I thought, okay, this is the German Film Archive. This is where they keep Murnau and all the great, you know, German filmmakers. Strange. So we went there, and actually I then became aware of all of these kind of mounds in the ground. And it made perfect sense then. The German Film Archive is actually stored now in what were the old German war bunkers, all underground. And so that was really quite an exciting experience. So yeah, you could make a film about the making of the film, or we could talk about the actual film. It's up to you.
In that sense, no, I think that that part is we can talk about both, but I think that this part is amazing so that people can understand. You just talk about 140 shots, and I have an idea, but out of the finished film that we have nowadays, okay, that it's roughly, let's say, 70 minutes, how much did you shot 33 years ago? How much of this length of the film was shot 33 years ago? More or less, just to have an idea.
Oh, maybe maybe 70, 75%, something like that.
Okay.
I would think, you know, but a lot of the footage that was shot intended to be put in a certain place in the film.
Yeah, and it's completely different.
Completely different and rearranged. So, you know, some shots are used more than once and things like that, you know, tricks you have to invent to make this completion of a film started so many years ago to finish it. And, you know, we started working on it actually, I think like in 2016, because the cleanup took a year of just
Forever, yeah.
frame by frame, you know, frame by frame. It was so bad.
And
so we
now,
didn't get around to pardon me?
Okay, now that's the part that I think it's so amazing, because at first I didn't, you told me, so I know about that story, but everybody that is watching the film is thinking that it was shot now. And
I
it's
know,
amazing,
you know, this is one of the most amazing compliments to my assistant too, Tanya Gunefeld. She did just an astonishingly patient job, and my color grader, who did the color correction also for House of Last Things, Jake Buff, just and so many, Shell White and Adam Sager, many people who worked here in Portland to make this possible, because the picture, I really should have some before and after what it looked like and what it looks like now, because I looked at some images today that we were going to post, you know, and it's hard to believe that they were even shot on 16 millimeter. They look so sharp and clear and beautiful. And it makes me think, well, maybe I should shoot on film again.
And the question is, now comes the tricky part, so that we can understand. How did you manage to shoot the extra 25% of the film to be such a perfect pitch? Because you can tell by seeing it what it was shot then and what's shot now.
You can or you can't?
You can't. You can't. There's no way.
Right. Well, I think that was a lot of a lot of soul searching and a lot of very precise location searching here in Portland. Some of the streets shots that are in Berlin are actually Portland, you know, and just a few of those that we did. And the things that we shot in Berlin, the few things where you see the mannequin, you know, there's a little flyer that says "lost," you know, and things like that. Those things had to be positioned in Berlin in places that haven't changed in 33 or so years. So it was actually a lot of fun doing that, though, I have to say. And some of the forest shots we did were done right here, just 5 minutes from the house. And some of the additions to the opening, there's a nudist beach scene at the beginning that was, we thought needed a little more, a little more fiff, you know. We shot right here in the backyard where we're talking right now, you know. But we were always very conscious of the angles, how to fit it. We knew which shot it was going to match to. So we could always, and then of course, Jake did a phenomenal job grading the shots to match the 16 millimeter, you know. You know, it was funny because when we started on working on the film, actually just cleaning up the film, it was looking pretty good. Tanya was really going in frame by frame, getting rid of dirt and scratches and everything imaginable. You know how it's done. You take the frame after the frame, You take elements from that and then you add it to that to make the bad frame look better. Oh, so many tricks. And we thought we were finished, and then a wonderful software came out that does a very good cleanup job. And so then we started from scratch again. And that's really, I think, what gave the film its really kind of, I guess if I can say the word, perfection of a look, you know, of back then. It wouldn't have been as good if we just used the new software. It was very good that we did first our very painstaking frame by frame work ourselves, you know. But no, it was, gee, I mean, there were a lot of very inventive, I think maybe, what were some of the harder shots that we did here in Portland? I mean,
Train tracks.
the train track scene, yes, when the garbage man is going over the train tracks, that was shot here in Portland, just 5 minutes from here in the forest. And yes, but it, and
the close-up, it was many close-ups.
yeah, many close-ups. You see, when you start to shift the footage around to re-edit the movie and make it look like a real movie from an actual professionally trained filmmaker and not some amateur kid from back in the day, you at least in my style, I don't like to just hard cut the things. I like to have nice little transitions, you know. So for the new scenes to kind of go nicely and smoothly to the next scene, I was creating a lot of new transitional shots, you know, to make it flow better, you know. Yeah. The really, you know, the hardest part, you know, if I can just interrupt for a second, Xiao, was, you know, we have a beautiful, a good violinist friend of mine who did all of the hand in 1986, the girl's hand, you know, and a very beautiful hand because she was a violinist, and she did it. She lived in my apartment building at the time, and whenever we were shooting the scene, she would come down for me. But when we went to shoot the new scenes, we needed a hand. And I have to tell you, the hardest part of redoing the movie was finding a hand to match. And you know the scene when he's in bed and he's asleep and she takes the telephone and calls on the phone and all that? This hand was shot in Portland to match the hand in 1986. And I'm so proud of that, because I think the hand is spectacular in the way it moves and everything. Because, you know, it's kind of an effect that I really liked. I still like, actually. And those are in-camera effects. Not you know, not CGI, but actual shot in front of the camera moments. You know, I think it makes things very special. So by today's standards, of course, we could have done some CGI something to make it work, but we actually found an amazing hand. And I have to tell you, maybe I shouldn't, but I was sitting here with a very nice Taylor Balcham, who lived here in the neighborhood at the time. And he used to come and visit when we were shooting House of Last Things. Very sweet boy. And he went to film school, and he said it was such an inspiration, that experience, seeing the shooting of House of Last Things, that he went to film school. And he came back, and I was showing him what I was working on, the Berlin Bride footage and how it was progressing and improving in quality and everything. And we just had a very nice talk and everything. And I was at the time looking for the hand for the girl. And so he went home, and I started to think, because it was just not working. There was no way I was going to find the hand, because the girl's hands are really special. You don't notice how important it is until you know it. Gee, this has to be on film, and actually the hand is another star of the movie. You know, the hand. And I just got this idea. I said, gee, Taylor, you know, he was right there next to me, and I don't know, this is maybe embarrassing or insulting, but his hand was beautiful. A very young boy, very beautiful hand. And I called him up and said, Taylor, you know, I don't know how to ask you this. it's so strange. But then for a movie as strange as this movie, what can be more strange? I said, Taylor, would you mind playing a woman's hand in the film? And he said, of course, that would be amazing. He loved it. And I was very thrilled. And we found a very good makeup artist here in Melissa Hill in Portland, who took care of his hand in the shots that we needed his hand, and put the fingernails on and everything. And he did a fine job. I probably shouldn't say that that it's actually a boy's hand. Now you know too much.
Before I move on to questions about the film itself, there is one question from the audience here that's very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Are you being able to read it?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I am. Yes, you know, thank you, Mariana, for the question, and it's a very good one, because there was something missing in the original footage that I didn't. I don't want to lie and say I didn't put it in then. I don't think I really knew at the time, 30 years ago, the potential for some of the story. I do know some of the things I was reading and watching back in 1986, and that was a lot of wonderful silent film, Murnau, especially, you know, Nosferatu. There's small little references image-wise to that surreal kind of German filmmaking of that early silent film era. And really, we have kind of essentially a modern silent film, except that there's music and sound, you know, and a little bit of dialogue. But to your point, Mariana, when I started to look at the footage again, there was an element I wanted to bring into the film that really never made it into the film, except for some of the music maybe I thought to have back then. And that was this idea of the German fantasist E.T.A. Hoffmann, who is actually, before Edgar Allan Poe, kind of considered one of the fathers of fantastic literature. You know, he's probably more known today around Christmas time when people watch the ballet The Nutcracker, because this is a story that he wrote that Tchaikovsky put into ballet, and many people made movies of The Nutcracker. And so one of the shots I shot in 2013, when I was there for House of Last Things, that made it into the film, was his grave, which is in Berlin. And I'd actually visited it when I lived in Berlin several times, because it was on my way to visit a friend. And this graveyard has some very famous people in it, Mendelssohn, the composer, and E.T.O. Hoffmann. So I shot this, and it actually came into the film at a place that just anchored the whole story for me, because it's in the graveyard in the opening sequence that you see this grave of E.T.O. Hoffmann, and that became kind of an inspiration for the whole movie, because much of the soundtrack then that Andrew Poole Todd developed for the film came out of a theme of E.T.O. Hoffmann's music for the famous opera. Oh God, now I'm losing my mind. What's it called? Hoffmann's The Tales of Hoffmann. It's a very famous opera. Yes. The Tales of Hoffmann, which is 3 stories about these different women. One of them actually a doll, a wind-up doll. So I think there was a lot of inspiration from reading those stories when I was a kid back in Berlin. And so it became this whole idea of Hoffmann being an important theme throughout the film only came in here in Portland. We wove that into the entire film here. It did not exist, and it was really missing to make it a complete film in my word. I hope that answers some of your question, Mariana.
So, what about these 2 amazing actors?
You know, this is one of the saddest parts of the film. I met actually the actor who plays the garbage collector in the parks and all this. again in Berlin in 2013, and we sat down and we talked about it, and I did a little interview with him, and I told him, you know, I think I knew we were working on finishing the film, but I didn't want to raise his expectations because at that time I didn't know how good it could maybe look still and all that. And around, I think it was 2019, about a year, 2018, when we were really finished, and I was very eager to share some of the footage with him, that I got notice from friends of mine in Berlin that he had passed away. And this really, really, really bummed me out for the longest time, because he would have been so excited and proud to have been a part of seeing the film as he'd never imagined it before, you know. So that is a really sad part of the whole film. But when you work on a movie that was started so long ago, these things can happen, you know. I mean, yes, yes. But we do have at the very end of the film, in memory of, he was a Hungarian actor, you know.
Oh, Hungarian.
He was Hungarian, yes.
Mm-hmm. And what about the shop owner?
The shop owner was a friend I'd met through other friends in Berlin who had a small opera company. And I have to admit that both of them had no idea what they were getting into, because as the project progressed and the more crazy ideas I had, they always thought they were finished, and I said, oh no, you're not finished. And then we'd come back and you know, I was still in the orchestra in Berlin at the time, and so I was basically saving money from my orchestra work to you know, develop this 16mm film, and I was learning. This was actually my film school before film school, because I really had no idea what I was doing. And you know, back then, if you shot on film, you would be lucky if you could see what you shot 5 days later. You know, it's not like today where, you know, you work in the computer and you can see the results immediately. So there was a lot of back and forth. You know, I think we shot about 30 minutes of footage, and I thought, well, I don't have enough money to go on, so we waited a while, and then we'd start again and do more ideas. And somehow I thought this could someday be a real story. But it started with actually a lot of very just kind of visuals, images I wanted to see and make into, yeah. But they were very cooperative, but they were always kind of very amazed how it wasn't yet finished. Yeah.
One of the things that people are mentioning about the film here is that, apart from being so amazed with the fact that you were able to recreate 1980s Berlin nowadays,
right,
is that they feel that the film is very onirical, and it's actually takes you to a dreamy place, and
yes.
that I think it's a quality that's very difficult to achieve.
Well, thank you. I hope we did. I have to credit actually Andrew's score and sound design to really helping that feeling for the film, because we really listened a lot to music of Bernard Herrmann, who did a lot of the very early Twilight Zone scoring, and I'm a big fan of his anyway. And we kind of we were searching really for the longest time the right music to bring this whole. There's barely any dialogue, so the sound and the music really becomes another protagonist, another character for the film. And I think we found it in finding this kind of minimalist kind of scoring that we did, you know. But I think if it feels dreamy and very, you know, I always say, you know, my kind of film, especially in this genre, I like to feel that you're creating a world that people can believe in, even if it's unbelievable, you know. So I like to shoot scenes and edit films together so that I always say it's like a pitcher of a very thick syrup, you know. You just pour it, and it keeps going, slowly pouring. Not a glass of water, which goes, but a syrup, very slow, thick syrup. And if you can bring all of the editing together like that and bind it together with music and transitions that really kind of always push you to the next scene, then I think you can create this. But, I have to credit, my cinematographer, who was just out of, you have to understand the guys who did this initial 16mm footage with me, I found them on one of my breaks from the orchestra. I was walking up the main street of Berlin, the Kurfürstendamm, and there were some kids out there with a camera and a tripod, and they were shooting things for their school project. And I said, gee, I'd really like to make a movie someday. and they said, oh, we want to do something too. And it just kind of became a crazy thing. And then I came up with these ideas, and we started working on it, But I have to say that, especially, Gerhard Friedrich, who I met again in Germany when we were in Germany in November with the film, just before Chicago, and now this is our third festival, and we have, I think, 2 more coming up, maybe more. But Gerhard did a phenomenal job, and it seemed like I couldn't come up with anything too crazy for them to do. Because, there's actually a scene, and I should probably post some of the making of images. There's a scene out there in the Berlin Botanical Garden where the garbage man is in bed and the walls open up, in back of him. And there's musicians there and everything, and then the walls close and we're gone. And I have to say, I think Gerhard became very inspired with he's a very hands-on kind of guy, and of constructing these things, and he spoiled me, because then I would come up with more and more ideas. I mean, how do you have a man in bed with a woman's hand? How do we do this? Let's sit down and think about it. And boom, we did it. And it was all very on-camera things. They've just so we had to make a bed, of course, that wasn't a bed at all. It was basically the guy who owns the boutique is laying on the bed, and underneath him is a woman down below. And the only thing of hers that was actually coming through, of course, was her hand. And the only way she could see what she was doing was through the pillow, which was a special black material that she can see through, but the camera can't see through. So these are just some of the tricks that we did. And I think, as when we weren't too exhausted, most of them all had a lot of fun coming up with ways to make these things work.
There is one comment here, and I think that's quite interesting, because this journalist mentioned about the film that there's a mingle of surrealism and sexuality that amazes the viewer. And I agree with this. And you managed to create, let's say, sexual tension between a mannequin and a man. But basically, in that particular scene, which is one of the scenes where you have a very strong, let's say, sexual tension, you have only a mannequin's hand. And that's quite unique.
Yeah, and could have been very tempting too, to take to different levels,
Yeah.
But, yeah. But I was very restrained, because there were many ideas, believe me, that I thought about that would have been maybe a more. It would have made the film something it was not meant to be, because I think this subtle kind of suggestion of sexuality and the transgender thing involves the audience more, than throwing very aggressive sexual things at them.
Without no aggressive, I think that, for instance, the lipstick scene, it's one, as you mentioned, it's you take the transgender level, and it's at the same time it's very sexual, but you are not showing anything, so you live up to their imagination, which is amazing.
That's right. We only see what happened that few minutes in that bed. That's right. We don't know what happened before or after, right? It's true, right? That's true with any movie.
And on that level, there is one question here from an audience member that is, and I don't know if he just got in now. He wants to know how you made the nudist scene in the beginning. Does that really exist?
It did in 1986, I will tell you, because I lived about 5 minutes walk from this lake, and oddly enough, you have to imagine what's the main important street in Porto Alegre or Berlin or Fifth Avenue. It's at the very Fifth Avenue, New York. It's at the very end of the street where the highway actually starts to begin, and there's a lake there called Halensee. And in the summer, it's very, very popular with people whose son and yes are nude and all that. And you have to understand, as a kid from very puritanical California, middle of the state kind of, this was very exotic to me, and not so much on the level of the nudity, because there was really no sexuality. There was no sexual anything happening there at all. And so I thought, gee, you know, this would be for a story about a mannequin, this would be the ideal place for a nude mannequin to be found, you know. And somehow we made it work. And, you know, everybody was so, when I came up with the idea to do that, they said, oh, this is going to be very hard. Nobody's going to want to, you know, that's terribly difficult. Everybody wanted to be in it, yo. Everybody, you know, no problem, no problem. And I told them we're making a little movie, and we need some people that are okay to be on the camera and all this and that. Oh, yes, I want to be in it. Me. And so we shot a lot of footage there, and we thought, well, we'll just shoot what we can, and we'll make it work there, you know. And then here, when we started to finish the film, complete the film here in Portland, we realized, you know, it needs. I would like to cut it quicker. I'd like it to be a little more fun-loving, you know, the whole scene. And I knew the music we were going to put into it because Andrew composed a kind of a 80s disco mix that we needed for the scene to make it more of a little party atmosphere, you know. So we shot about another additional 6 shots for that scene here in Portland, you know. And yeah. But most of the really nude shots were shot actually in Berlin. But you know, close-ups of like stabbing some garbage on the park and things like that, you know. So there is hardly a scene in the movie that doesn't have additional work in it, you know, additional shots, yeah. But yes, to answer the question, it was probably the easiest of all the scenes, which you would think wouldn't be the case. I don't know. Do people lay around on the beach in Brazil naked?
I think that there are nudist beaches, but
Yeah,
there are
probably
very few.
I can imagine. Yeah.
This is very, very rare, I'd say.
Yeah.
I think you have way more that in Europe than in Brazil, actually.
Yeah. In 2013, I shot some of the footage. Now, when I was in Berlin for the House of Last Things premiere, it was in kind of like, what was it, late fall or winter or something like that. And of course, there was nobody there. But I wanted to shoot some exteriors of just the location, so we had an orientation. So we shot some of the shots in 2013 and some of the other shots here then in 2019 and 1986, and somehow it all came together. But it was a lot of very precise editing to make it work. And my assistant, Tanya, was amazing and patient, very patient, Yeah.
Oh, we have to wrap up in about 5 minutes. So
Okay.
I would like to say again that I think it's very interesting for us as a festival to be to be bringing a film such as yours and to have it being seen by so many people that are getting it. You know, that's such. I, I was very curious about how people would respond to the film in Brazil
Hmm.
because let's say it's a film that it's being released as a film made in the US in 2019,
Uh-huh.
and you really have the, let's say, the spirit of I would not even say a German film, but an Eastern European film from the 80s, which
Hmm.
is amazing. And I think it has everything to become a cult classic in the years to come.
Oh, thank you.
And it's a real pleasure to talk to you. And one very important thing, if you would like to share it with your friends, or if anybody from the audience that's watching us would like to see it again or to share it with others, the Q&A will be here until the end of the festival, so people can see it at any time. So it's interesting because we are getting lots of views after the actual Q&A.
Okay, sure. I want to thank you and all of your colleagues working on the festival, because this, I think, was, I haven't been able to see all of the films, of course, but must have been a very unusual film to have in the festival. I can only hope that the fact that there is so little dialogue makes it very easy to see in Brazil, and for people who don't have any language barriers. One thing I'd like to say, a friend of mine who works for a festival, also a big festival in Mexico, where House of Last Things was, is a friend of mine from Germany. And when the film was finished, and he lived in Berlin. And when the film was finished, I said, listen, I'd like to share this with you till you get a little idea of what I've been working on. I don't know if it's right for your festival, but take a look. So we talked then afterwards on Facebook, and his first thing was, Michael, how did you do this? This must have cost a fortune. How did you do all this period stuff in
Mhm.
2019, you know? And I was shocked because he actually lived in Berlin and he was German. And I was so happy because I knew, we succeeded. People think it was actually made today.
Yeah, I haven't seen nobody thinking that the film was not made nowadays. And this is amazing. This is such a unique thing that you've made. And I do hope it gets the success it deserves.
Thank you so much, Yao. Big hugs to all of you and everybody at the festival. Thank you for watching the film. And I hope we all see each other again for real someday. Yeah.
Thank you, Renee. Thank you, Michael. It was a pleasure having you here with us. And I do hope we meet each other soon.
Thank you, Yao. Thank you very much. Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.
Ciao.